Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Marcus Delaney had it all. Money, power, influence. He lived in a world where the rules never seemed to apply to him. Laws? Mere formalities. Morality? A weakness to others. For him, everything was a matter of domination and control. Every gesture, every word, every glance was calculated to assert his superiority. That evening, he was hosting a lavish reception in his penthouse, perched high above the city, overlooking the lights that shimmered like an echo of his grandeur. The guests were hand-picked, celebrities, financiers, politicians, all susceptible to his charisma and apparent power. Marcus moved among them with that arrogant smile, certain of his complete control over the evening. Yet, in the shadows, a presence eluded him. Isabel Harper. A woman whose simplicity seemed almost unremarkable at first glance, a simple dress, an attentive gaze, an aura of almost intimidating calm. But beneath this tranquil exterior lay a silent and implacable force, a sharp intelligence capable of reading Marcus better than anyone else. Just as he was about to humiliate a business partner to reinforce his dominance, Isabel intervened. With a simple but perfectly chosen phrase, she derailed Marcus's meticulously prepared plan. The other guests noticed nothing, but she felt an unusual shiver, a mixture of anger and astonishment. No one had ever resisted her with such finesse. Marcus thought he knew all the rules of the game, and that everyone could be manipulated. But Isabel wasn't just a player, she was the pawn that transformed into a king on the chessboard. And for the first time in his life, Marcus felt that his empire, his superiority, was in danger. He didn't know it yet, but tonight marked the beginning of a storm he could never have anticipated. He had just met the wrong woman. The next morning, Marcus Delaney woke up in his penthouse as usual, certain that the world would bend to his will. But a persistent memory from the previous day pulled him from his routine, that look. That implacable calm. That woman who, with a single word, had derailed his entire plan. Isabel Harper. He couldn't understand how a complete stranger had dared to stand up to him. His pride, forged in years of absolute control, burned with a simmering irritation. And, as usual, his first reaction was to right the wrong. He had to meet her again, put her in her place, and show her that no woman, no person, could challenge Marcus Delaney. Chance, or perhaps fate, led him to see her again a few hours later in a posh downtown cafe. Isabel, engrossed in her paperwork, seemed completely unaware of Marcus's presence. He smiled confidently and stepped forward. But he immediately sensed that the confrontation would not be easy. His usual self-assurance clashed with an impenetrable serenity. "Hello," he said, with that smile that so many people had come to admire. "Hello," she replied simply, without looking up. Marcus sensed her surprise. She wasn't intimidated, not impressed. His arrogance took a hit. He then tried to seduce her with charming words, but every sentence he uttered seemed to bounce off an invisible wall, a wall of determination and lucidity that Isabel erected with disconcerting ease. "You are Marcus Delaney, aren't you?" she asked calmly. "And you are Isabel Harper. And I'm not impressed by your reputation." These words struck Marcus like a thunderbolt. He had never met anyone capable of treating him with such frankness, without fear, without flattery, and above all without bowing to him. At that precise moment, Marcus understood something he had always avoided: control, power, and money couldn't buy everything. And Isabel Harper had just reminded him of that, with a force he had never felt before. He stood up, not to leave, but to accept the silent challenge this woman had just issued. Marcus Delaney, used to dominating everything around him, had just encountered his first real resistance. And deep down, he knew this confrontation would change his life. In the days that followed, Marcus couldn't get Isabel out of his mind. Every plan he devised to regain control vanished the moment he thought of her unwavering composure. She wasn't just an ordinary woman, she seemed to anticipate his every move, every power play. And that certainty he'd always held, that he was above everyone else, was beginning to waver. However, Marcus wasn't one to give up easily. He decided to learn more about her. His research revealed that Isabel Harper worked as an independent business consultant, known for her integrity and efficiency. Nothing in her background suggested she would be intimidated by a man like him. On the contrary, her reputation showed that she stood tall, even in the face of the most powerful. One evening, at a charity gala, fate brought them face to face again. Marcus, surrounded by his usual allies, approached her with a mixture of determination and fascination. "Isabel," he said, trying to sound charming, "you never seem impressed by anything." "Impressed?" she replied, looking him straight in the eye. "I'm not trying to be. I prefer to see reality as it is." Marcus felt a new tension. Every word from Isabel seemed to unsettle him more. He tried to mask it with his usual smile, but she wasn't fooled by artifice. She had that rare gift of perceiving pride behind appearances, and Marcus, for the first time, felt vulnerable. "Are you sure you want to play this game with me?" she asked, a slight smile on her lips. "I'm sure I can control everything," he replied arrogantly, but without conviction. She burst into a light but determined laugh, and the sound hit Marcus harder than he cared to admit. For the first time, he felt that subtle fear, that sense that territory he thought he knew perfectly could slip through his fingers. Isabel wasn't just a woman, she was a living challenge, a storm he didn't know how to tame. As he left the gala that evening, Marcus realized something inevitable: he was no longer the one calling the shots. For the first time, he would have to follow someone else's lead, or face the consequences. And Isabel Harper, without realizing it, had just become the force capable of changing him forever. Marcus Delaney thought everything could be bought or manipulated. But with Isabel Harper, he encountered an invisible, solid, and inflexible wall. Every attempt to surprise, convince, or seduce her failed. And the more he failed, the greater his frustration became. This time, they met at the office. Marcus had learned that Isabel was consulting for a company in the midst of negotiating a major contract, a contract in which he, Marcus, had a personal interest. He entered the meeting room with that mixture of charisma and arrogance he had always used to intimidate. "Hello, Isabel," he said in a confident voice, as if to remind everyone that he was Marcus Delaney and that he could control the situation. "Hello," she replied simply, without looking up from her files. The tone was set. Marcus then attempted a subtle attack, his usual way of manipulating discussions to get his interlocutors to back down: flattery, intimidation, veiled insinuations. But Isabel outmaneuvered him with every sentence, calmly, methodically. Every attempt at control was turned against him. "Are you sure this contract is in everyone's best interest?" she asked, putting down her pen and looking him straight in the eye. "I see a huge risk if certain decisions are made without thinking." Marcus felt his face tighten. No one had ever contradicted him with such authority and clarity. He tried to smile, to regain his composure, but his words sounded false even to his own ears. Isabel had prepared every argument, every detail, as if she knew exactly how he would react. Then came the moment when she took complete control of the meeting. With a simple gesture and a precise phrase, she reversed the course of the negotiations. Marcus's partners, usually intimidated by her stature, turned to her with respect and confidence. Marcus, on the other hand, felt invisible, stripped of his power. As he left the office, he realized a truth that hit him harder than any financial failure: Isabel Harper wasn't just an adversary. She was the exception to his rule, the challenge he couldn't overcome, and he would have to choose between accepting it or submitting to it. For the first time in his life, Marcus Delaney felt the vertigo of powerlessness. And he knew that the storm that had just begun was only growing. Marcus Delaney had always believed his life was a chessboard where he held all the pieces. But Isabel Harper had just proven to him that some forces could not be anticipated or controlled. After several confrontations where he had failed to overcome her, he was beginning to feel something he had never known: doubt. That evening, an unexpected invitation arrived. Isabel was inviting him to a charity event organized by her company. Intrigued and frustrated by her curiosity, Marcus decided to go. But it wasn't just any gala. Isabel had prepared a test, a subtle trial designed to show him that he wasn't above the consequences of his actions. In the center of the room, a presentation revealed Marcus's true colors, his manipulations, his selfish decisions, and his attempts to dominate innocent people. The guests, guided by Isabel, saw Marcus in a light he had never imagined. For the first time, he felt the weight of judgment, not legal, but moral. Isabel then approached him, not angry, but with a piercing gaze. "You thought you were above the law, Marcus. But there are laws that even money and power can't buy. Respect, integrity, humanity, that's what you ignored." Marcus felt his pride waver. Every word resonated like a truth he couldn't escape. He had spent his life dominating others, believing nothing could touch him. And yet, here, facing Isabel, he understood how naive he had been. For the first time, he bowed down, not to the public, but to a truth he could no longer deny. Isabel had not only won this battle. She had opened Marcus's eyes to himself, to his weaknesses, and to the necessity of change. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus and Isabel found themselves alone. The silence between them was not heavy with conflict, but filled with gratitude. "You have shown me that I am not invincible," he said finally, humbly. "And you have shown me that even the most powerful can learn to change," she replied calmly. It was a pivotal moment. Marcus understood that true power lay not in dominating others, but in the ability to transform oneself and respect those who refuse to be crushed. Isabel wasn't just the bad woman he'd met. She was the storm that forced him to see the truth and be reborn in a way he never could have imagined. And from that day on, Marcus Delaney was no longer the same man.